Welcome back to the channel. We're back with our Final Fantasy Commander deck profile with Garnet, Princess of Alexandria, lifelink. She's a 2/2 for 2. Whenever Garnet attacks, you may remove a lore counter from each saga you control. Put a +1/+1 counter onto Garnet for each lore counter removed this way. So you do have plenty of sagas in here in order to make sure that we get that benefit off of how many +1/+1 counters you can put onto Garnet there, along with just being some good saga creatures and enchantment benefits off them. But that's the general overview of the deck, much shorter than normal. Let's get into it card by card. As always, just like to ask that you like, comment, subscribe so you can stay tuned for future videos if you like this one. As always, we start with an Arcane Signet because we like to see that mana. Helm of the Gods. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each enchantment you control. We want to make it a little bit less scary to swing in with Garnet, so let's make sure that we could do that by giving her some additional power for each saga we control, because those are all enchantments as well. Lightning Grease, we want to make sure we can swing in with Garnet the turn she comes down, this way in case she does keep getting removed. While these do also protect her with Lightning Grease and the Swiftfoot Boots. But like I said, it's mostly for the making sure she could swing the turn she gets down, to make sure we remove those saga counters, to make sure that we could keep those sagas around just a little bit longer. Power Conduit, remove a counter from a permanent you control, normally a lore counter off of a saga we control, or you can put a +1/+1 counter on target creature if we want to. You can put making it a little bit less scary swinging with Garnet if we need to at a certain point, but it's mostly going to be making sure we get those lore counters moved around so that we could use the abilities again and again. The way that the lore counters do work is that you'll get the first ability the turn it comes down, second turn you'll get the second one, but with Garnet's ability you could remove the second counter in order to get the first ability again there. They do normally get exiled after get sacrificed after you get to the dirt ability. Not that one, but this one. Not that one either, actually. Where's the good one? There we go. This one, for example, they get sacrificed, but we can make sure that they stay around a little bit longer, get some additional abilities off them as well. Summoner's Grimoire, job select. Equip creature is a shaman in addition to its other types. Whenever this creature attacks, you may put a creature from your hand onto the battlefield. If that card is an enchantment, it enters tapped and attacking as well. So, since most of our sagas are the new summons out of the Final Fantasy set, that'll allow us to have our summons tapped and attacking while we're at it. Summon Materia. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. As long as this equipment is attached to a creature, you may cast spells from the top of your library. Equip creatures +2/+2, vigilance, tap for mana. So, it allows us to swing in with Garnet just a little bit easier with these cards as well, by having that additional power bonus there as well. A little bit of protection on Swiftfoot Boots, along with making sure she could swing the turn she comes in. Same as Lightning Grease. Oh, I was going to say this. Skip over Soul Ring in this deck, but nope. There it is. Next we have Calyx, Guided by Fate. Whenever Calyx, Guided by Fate, or another creature you control enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter onto target creature. We can put that onto Garnet, making sure Garnet could swing in just a little bit easier. Whenever Calyx or an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may create a token that's a copy of a non-legendary enchantment you control. Do this only once each turn. All of these summons are non-legendary. They're just enchantment creatures, because I don't think they could fit more words on there. They probably could, but it allows us to create more copies of those summons, making sure we can use the Saga's abilities again and again. Control Fragment starts as a equipped creature gets +1/+1, but for 7 mana, we could transform it, and it becomes a Saga. As a forgery flying, prevent all damage that would be dealt to creatures you control's turn, allowing us to swing in with ease, because our creatures wouldn't die. Once we get to the dirt ability, tap all creatures your opponents control, allowing us to swing in even easier, because our opponent doesn't have anything to block with. Next we have Destiny Spinner. Creatures and enchantments you control can't be countered, allowing us to cast our spells with ease without worrying about our opponent countering our stuff. And then for 4 mana, target land you control becomes an XX Elemental with Trample, where X is the number of enchantments you control, which will be plenty at a certain point. We have 7 here, but almost all of our creatures are also enchantments, so those do count. Aeon of Blossoms. Whenever Aeon of Blossoms or another enchantment you control enters the battlefield, draw a card. We like drawing cards. Yeah, it helps us get to more sagas. Esper Origins. Frail 2, gain 2 life. Spells cast from your graveyard, exile, which is our flashback cast of 4 mana. And it comes back with its summon ability. Reveal the top card of your library if it's a permanent. Put it into your hand. A little bit of draw power there, which we run 20 instants or sorceries, so that counts lands as well. So 80 out of 100 chance, pretty good odds there. Add 2 green mana, which is the main ability we like to see on this one. Or other creatures control get +2/+2 and gain trample on the turn. We got some big creatures, make them even bigger, making sure we can deal out damage to our opponent. Herald of the Pantheon, making it so our enchantments cost less to cast, and whenever you cast an enchantment and gain a life, maybe you need that little bit of life just at a certain point. Could help out a whole bunch. For this saga, create a 1/1 human monk creature token. I could tap for mana. We need that extra mana at a certain point, because we do run some pretty high costed spells in here. Just an example. Put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures, potentially Garnet, making sure she could swing in easier, and then transform this if it gets the 3rd ability. Whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield, under your control, you may pay X and put X +1/+1 counters on that creature, allowing us to get the pretty big creature on the board. And as long as you control a modified creature, Remnant of the Rising Star gets +5/+5 and trample, basically making it into a 7/7 if it lasted those 3 turns, because we'll normally have something with a lore count on it, and that would count for the, what's it called? So +5/+5. Jukai Naturalist, lifelink enchantment spells cost 1 less to cast. He's also an enchantment spell, so he does get that benefit of both being an enchantment and a creature. Mason Enchantress for a little bit of draw power anytime we cast an enchantment spell. Machiko's Reign of Truth. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn for each artifact or enchantment we control, which could be plenty at a certain point, making it easier to swing in with Garnet. And then its other ability, we could transform it into a creature, which has +1/+1 for each artifact and enchantment we control. Keep powering it up, making it into a big creature. Maybe we get trample at a certain point. Undo Spirit Dancer. Whenever an enchantment you control enters, create a copy of it. Why have only one? The Weather Seed Treaty. One we could have 2. And it's just whenever an enchantment you control enters, it doesn't necessarily have to be cast. So if we did like this one transformed, it exiles itself and returns to the battlefield as the enchantment creature. So we get 2 of those instead, which is really nice to see. Sanctum Weaver. Tap to add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of enchantments you control. That'll be plenty of mana, which we'll need. Let's scroll on down a little bit. Satsuki, the Living Lower. Put a lore counter on each saga you control, helping us get to its potential ultimate ability, but also getting those counters to remove with Garnet's ability, allowing us to get up to that, those additional +1/+1 counters. And you can also return some sagas from your graveyard to the battlefield, or to your hand if you want them to. Not from the graveyard to the hand, or from the battlefield to your hand, depending on what we need at the time, of course. Satyr Enchanter, a little bit more draw power there. He's not an enchantment creature, so not necessarily as good as some of the other ones that do get that enchantment creature ability with that. Cetacean Champion. Constellation, put a +1/+1 counter on her and draw a card anytime an enchantment enters the battlefield. Good ability there, gets us another creature that's pretty good at blocking. Starfield Mystic to help us reduce costs and put +1/+1 counters on himself anytime an enchantment enters the battlefield. Now, on to the new cards, which are going to take quite some time to read through, probably. Summon Bahamut, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent for its first 2 abilities. Third ability allows you to draw 2 cards. And its ultimate ability to 4, this creature deals damage equal to the total mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent. So if we manage to keep our sagas around for quite some time, just having him and, say, summon Knights of the Round, that's 15 mana on the board. Let's see. As the saga enters and after each draw step, add a lore counter, sacrifice it after 4. So we do get the ability with him still on the battlefield, I do believe. He's also 9/9 for 9 with flying, which could be a big creature to swing in on our opponents with. Summon Fenrir. He's a 3 mana 3/2, but his first ability, get a forest out of your deck. Oh, nope, actually basic land card, my mistake. Whenever you cast a creature spell for his second ability, put a stun counter whenever you next cast a creature spell this turn, that creature enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. I don't know why I was reading Sun counter on there. And then draw a card if you control a creature with the greatest power on the field. So, we'll normally have that, given how we have some big creatures in this deck. We have additional ways to pump them up. But, sometimes our opponent will have a creature that could supersede ours. So we don't get that draw power, but the first two abilities are the main ones that you want to focus on by removing those lore counters. Summon God King Mog the 12th. Create 2 Mughals for the first ability, second and third. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell this turn, create a token that's a copy of a non-saga token you control. So, keep on creating more and more copies of the creatures that we need. More Mughals, more damage. Keep on getting that first ability so we get more Mughals on the battlefield. And then 4, put 2 +1/+1 counter on each other Mughal you control. So eventually, when we got all those Mughals on the battlefield, we could pump them up or deal big damage there. Summon Ixion. First ability, exile target creature an opponent controls until the saga leaves the battlefield, which hopefully this won't leave the battlefield, and we could just keep exiling more and more things by keep having that first ability over and over again. And for a second and third ability, put a +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. Gain a little bit of life off that. It's a 3/3 with first strike. Nice to see that. For 8 mana, for the first 4 abilities, we get 3 2/2 white knight creature tokens, allowing us to get 6. We basically get 9 power and toughness total, 3 of which is indestructible for 8 mana. It's a pretty okay trade, but this one we may want to focus on getting towards the last one, or making it so that we have the first ability, second ability, and third ability, and fourth ability happen over and over again, so that we can make sure we keep getting more and more tokens off that ability. Other creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn and put an indestructible counter on each of them, allowing us that little bit of extra protection for Garnet, but it's going to be quite rare that we get to that final ability. I don't know how many games last till you have 8 mana and then 5 more turns after that. Summon Maja's Sisters. Put 3 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Target creature fights another creature, or you gain 3 life. Or put a shield counter on another target creature. Depends what we need at the time. This is random, so this one, not necessarily the best one, just another summon I did want to find a place to put. Summon Primal Garda. This creature deals 4 damage to target tapped creature an opponent controls. Okay, if they swung in and we have this come out, we get to remove something on their board. Keep having that happen over and over again if we need to, in order to deal more than 4 damage. Summon Titan. Mill 5 cards. Not necessarily useful in this one. But then we get to return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped, which that one is helpful in conjunction with that mill there. And its final ability, until end of turn, another target creature you control gains trample and +X/+X, where X is the number of lands you control. Actually, I think that's pretty fun in a landfall deck or like the lumber deck that I run. Next, summon Yojimbo. Exile target artifact, enchantment, tapped creature an opponent controls that's just like that. Until your next turn, creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 mana for each of those creatures, allowing us to be harder swinging on us. This way, maybe we'll get to turn 13 with Summon Knights of the Round. Set this Harvest Hand. Here it was with the enchantment creature I was talking about earlier that does gain you life and draw you a card anytime you cast an enchantment spell. Verudin Enchantress. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. A little bit of draw power helps out a whole bunch. Yenna, Red Tooth Regent. For 4 mana, you get a 4/4. For 2 mana, you can tap it, choose target enchantment you control that doesn't have the same name, make a copy of it, making it so that we get 2 Summon Knights of the Round Table if we really need to. Or 2 Summon Yojimbos, summon 2 something else that we need 2 of. And then lastly, Yuna Hoposphere, which this could also be a Yuna deck if you wanted to run it that way. During your turn, Yuna and enchantment creatures you control have Trample, Lifelink, and Ward 2. At the beginning of your end step, return up to 1 target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it, allowing us to keep on getting those cards back again and again. Let's go on over to the second half of the deck now. Oh, did I scroll too far? Nope, we're good. start off, we have some enchantments, more sagas, so more stuff to read through. We have Elspeth, Conqueror's Death. Exile target permanent opponent controls with mana value 3 or less. Gets rid of a Soul Ring. Helps us out a little bit. And non-creature spells your opponent's cast cost 2 more to cast until your next turn. Slows our opponent down a little bit so we get our Saga abilities off a little bit more. And then return target creature or planeswalker from your graveyard to the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter and loyalty counter on it as well. Or a loyalty counter on it. Depending on what we need at the time, we get one of our creatures back, especially if it's one that was already sacrificed because it was a Saga creature. Has a bunch there. Whenever you cast an enchantment, draw a card. We've seen this ability quite a few times now. Of Herbs of Stewed Rabbit, put a +1/+1 counter up to one target creature. Once again, we like to power up Garnet a little bit. This way it's just a little bit easier swinging with her. Draw a card, create a food token. A little bit of draw power helps out. And then create a 1/1 white halfling creature token for each food you control, which will probably just be 2. But if we get the first 2 abilities over and over again, thanks to Garnet's ability, it could, get us quite a few 1/1 creature tokens. Tale of Truenvale, target creature you control gains indestructible for as long as you control the Saga, which, that makes it even easier swinging with Garnet. This way you keep removing the counter in order to keep getting the first ability. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Allows us to get our 9 mana spell back onto the battlefield again and again if we need to. And up to 2 target creatures you control each gain lifelink until end of turn. We don't really want to see that ability. We want the first 2. Next, we have the first Irrelevant Games. Create a soldier token, put 3 +1/+1 counters on the target creature. If you control a creature with power 4 or greater, draw 2 cards, or create a gold token. It's a few good abilities just stacked onto one card. You run something else. But this one is still nice to see every so often. Princess Takes Flight. For first ability, exile up to 1 target creature. Target creature you control gets +2/+2 in flying, allowing us to, swing in with Garnet even easier, allowing us to get that first ability again and again, allowing us to get more and more things exiled off our opponent's boards. They will normally return if we get to the third ability, but let's just not get there. Let's take what we have. And then the Weather Treaty. Search the library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield. We'll need plenty of mana to attack. Create a 1/1 Sapperling token. Okay, we're going to want to do those abilities again and again. Gain more tokens, gain more lands. We like to see it. And then target creature control gets +X/+X and gains trample, where X is the number of basic land types among lands you control, which could be up to 3. So Garnet could go from being a 2/2 to a 5/5. Or, Bahamut can go from being a 9/9 with flying to 9/9 with flying and trample. Sorry, 12/12 with flying and trample. Next, we have our instance with Beast Within for some removal. Dawn's Truce for some hexproof indestructible onto all of our cards, allowing us that bit of protection. Enlightened Tutor, let's get the one that we want out of our deck into our hand, rather than letting our draw power take its course. We can also exile and blink our sagas in order to make sure we have their abilities happen again and again. They'll also enter with no lore counters on them to start off. So you get to start off with their abilities. Sorry, well, no, I think they enter with 1 lore counter. My apologies for misspeaking there. Story Weave, put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature you control. Put 2 lore counters on target saga you control, allowing us to get to a final ability even quicker on something we want. Source of Plowshare for removal, Tamio Safekeeping for a little bit of protection there on 1 target thing. Same thing with Ultimate Magic Holy. And then finally, as always, I always like to go through the lands last, because I always like to say you don't necessarily have to spend $100 on lands. You can spend whatever your budget calls for. Austere Command for a board wipe there. Brilliant Restoration. Get all of our sagas back from the graveyard. This way, in case we weren't able to cast Garnet because people kept countering it, we could keep getting those sagas back anyway. Clash of the Acons. Target creature you control fights target creature and opponent controls. Remove a lore counter, making sure we get those abilities again and again. Or put a lore counter on somewhere if you want to get to that final ability. Cultivate for the lands. Idyllic Tutor. Once again, let's get the enchantment that we want. Ishgard's Holy Site. Get the one that we want back from our graveyard if it got removed. Nature's Lore and Rampant Growth for that extra land. And Resurgent Belief is basically the same card as a Brilliant Restoration, except it has to be suspended first. But that's the deck. As always, just like to say thanks so much for coming out to the channel. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe so you can stay tuned for future videos. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a good rest of the day.